You provide the path and the compass, the spirit to notice your presence when I need it the most. You provide the fuel to my fire, a burning desire to know you, to know you. I'm desperate for your presence, 'cause I can't live without you, 'cause I can't live without you. I'm desperate for your presence, yes I am, 'cause I can't live without you, Lord.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you so much for inviting me into your home. This is such an interesting time of the year, right after we've celebrated the birth of Jesus and enjoyed all the beauty of the Christmas season. And then we're now moving into a new year and we begin to project into the future, our dreams, our hopes, maybe even our fears and concerns. And I think this is an important time for us because we're usually filled with gratitude. We are aware of all the good in our lives. We've had family and friends and community, and maybe you've got that gift you're really hoping you'd get. And when we're filled and fueled with gratitude, it's a perfect time to begin to dream and imagine and look toward the future. There's a particular passage of scripture I wanted to share with you today, and I hope it gives you a foundational context to begin to think about 2025. I want to make sure for you and for me that 2025 doesn't happen to us, but that we happen to it. And in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, the scriptures tell us this. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. One of the things that I think is so powerful about this particular passage of scripture is that we're actually being called to live a particular life in this world. So oftentimes when we talk about faith or our relationship to God or our connection to Jesus, it's usually about our connection to eternity, that we have this incredible promise of life after death, that we're going to live and commune and experience the wonder of being fully alive in God's presence and on God's mission. And I think sometimes we don't realize that the death of Jesus, the sacrifice he made for us, was as much for how we live this life as for how we live the next life. And here in Hebrews 12, the writer is so aware of the reality of life, that life is hard. Life is filled with challenges. It's filled with disappointments. It's filled with pain. It's filled with suffering. Life is an incredible array of human emotions, from joy to sorrow, from love to hate, from forgiveness to bitterness, from moments of incredible exhilaration to moments of overwhelming despair. And that is the human experience. But I think sometimes the way we face life, we act as if the good moments are supposed to be every moment of our life. And then the bad moments are the interruptions of life. But the reality is that many times it's the flip. Those extraordinary moments of joy, they're the ones that surprise us. They're the ones that come at us and almost overwhelm us in a moment. And the reality is that life is a challenge, that God has placed us in this world. And even when we turn our lives to him and we enter into a relationship with him, he doesn't change the context of life. Life is still full of life and death. It is still full of peace and war. It is still full of relationships and conflicts. It is still full of laughter and sorrow. Life is still the same texture of environment that we have with or without faith. So what we can know, because sometimes we think, oh, if I enter into this relationship with Jesus, it's going to change the environment of my faith. It's going to change the context of my faith. But here's what we do know, and even this passage makes it so clear, that your faith doesn't change the context of your life. It doesn't change the environment of your life. It changes the inner world of you. What changes when you come to faith is who you are. And now, that same texture of life, that same environment of life, those same circumstances of life are now interacted with, they're engaged with in a different way, not because they've changed, but because you've changed. So he reminds us, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us off. I love that particular translation, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. So he begins by giving us this huge context of encouragement. There are people cheering you on. There are others who have run this race, others who have lived this life, and they're the huge crowd, they're the audience, they're the ones who have filled this coliseum of life, and they're celebrating you. And there's several things here that are so important. One is that he wants us to know there are others who have gone before us, others who have taken on the challenge of living a life of faith. And by the way, he makes it very clear that a life of faith is a great challenge. It's not just a great calling, it's a great challenge. And the reason we need to be encouraged in this is that most of the factors of life will lead you to want to give up, will make you want to just let go of the big dream and the big calling and the big sense of destiny that you have in your life. So he wants you to know there's a huge crowd of witnesses, others who have gone before you and me, who have lived this life of faith. The life of faith is not easier. The life of faith is harder. I wish I could tell you the opposite. Wouldn't it be so much easier to say, entrust your life to Jesus and God's going to make your life easier because the life of faith is easier? But that's not the invitation. And sometimes that's the way we've made it sound. But what God is actually saying is that life is just as hard and maybe even harder. Because when you choose to live a life of faith, you're going counterculturally. You're going against the current. You are fighting the gravitational pull of the direction everyone else in the world is going. When you choose a life of faith, you're making a 180-degree turn to live the life that you were created to live. And that takes incredible strength, perseverance, courage, and faith. So then he gives us basically advice. He gives us the construct from which we can live this life of faith. And this is what I want to challenge you for the beginning of 2025. He says, let us strip off every weight that slows us down. That's the beginning point. Let us strip off every weight that slows us down. It's almost as if he's giving us this image that there's a life God created you to live, and it requires you to move at a certain speed. It's a light speed. It's the speed of light in your life. And God wants you to move in such a clear intention, with such a powerful focus and direction. But there are things that you're going to allow to get attached to you. They're going to get attached to you. They're going to weigh you down, and they're going to slow you down. And so if you can think of it in terms of getting into that sweet spot. Yeah, I'm not even sure what bikers call it when the biker lines up behind the biker in front of him and gets into that flow, gets into that draft, and they start drafting on the bike in front of them, or the car pulls up and just leans almost against that car and gets pulled into the draft of that car. What God is actually telling you is that he is moving, and he's moving in the direction of the future you're supposed to live. And if you'll align yourself with him, you'll get in the draft of his power, the draft of his gravitational pull, the draft of his momentum. But if you allow yourself to get slowed down, now you're trying to move maybe even in the same direction, but without that force of power of God's presence and direction and leadership in your life. So you need to strip off every weight that slows you down. Now, the weight that slows me down may be different than the weight that slows you down. And in fact, what I would say is the weight that has slowed me down has been different throughout my life. Sometimes it's been one thing that has weighed me down, and then later I've worked my way through that, and then it's something else that weighs me down. Because I think if you're like me, we have a propensity to attach ourselves to things that actually weigh us down from living the life God created us to live. And sometimes those weights are internal, emotional, psychological weights, like self-doubt. You just don't believe in yourself. You don't believe that God can do something unique or special in your life. You don't believe that you've been given God-given talents and capacities and a destiny that really matters. And sometimes what weighs you down is your own sense of self. Sometimes fear can be the weight that slows you down. You cannot move at the speed of faith when you're weighed down by fear. You cannot move at the speed at which God wants to take your life forward into your best future if you're weighed down by fear. If you're afraid of failure, afraid of suffering, afraid of rejection, afraid of what other people think, afraid of what other people say, whatever may be the material for that fear will always slow you down from God's intention in your life. And if you were honest, have you ever had a moment of reflection where you just thought to yourself, I feel like I've lost my momentum. I feel like I'm stuck. I feel like I'm not moving forward. I feel like I'm at the same place right now that I was 5 years ago. I don't know if there's anything more suffocating than when you feel trapped in your own life. Because how do you escape the prison of you? And God actually gives us a solution. He gives us a way forward. He says you need to strip every weight that slows you down. So sometimes that weight may be your fear. Sometimes it may be your self-doubt. Sometimes that weight is very, very tangible. You are simply bringing the wrong people into your life. Sometimes the weight that slows you down are the people that you choose to have in your life. The people that are informing you, that are shaping your identity, and that are limiting your capacity and performance and mission forward. Sometimes we're slowed down by the wrong values. We're slowed down because we're focusing on money rather than significance. We're focusing on fame rather than service. And we have to look at our value system and ask ourselves, are the things I actually care about, the things that I'm actually pursuing, are they the weight that's slowing me down? Which is a really odd thing, because you think of things like success or fame or wealth or position or power as things that would pull you forward to the future. And in a sense, they're ambitions that we pursue in the future, but they can also be weights that slow us down from God's future for us. And then he adds this particular nuance, which is so important, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. It's almost as if he knew that we all have maybe this one thing that is our Achilles heel, the one thing that keeps us from living the life God created us to live. You know, when you're a person of faith, a lot of times you think of the cosmic battle as being the battle between good and evil. But the practical reality of everyday life is that the battle for you is not the battle between good and evil. The battle for you and for me is the battle between good and average. The battle between good and neutral. The battle between good and complacency. I cannot imagine there are many of you listening to me right now who wake up every day making a choice between good and evil. You're just not doing it. You're not deciding, well, do I go to church or do I rob a bank? Do I choose to be the best father in the world, or do I choose to walk away from my family? Most of us are not making these extreme decisions between good and evil. Most of us are getting lost in the in-between. We don't choose to be the best father, and we don't choose to be the worst father. We just choose to be absent when we're present. We don't choose to reject a job or a career or making a meaningful salary. We're not choosing to rob and steal so that we can have an income. We're just choosing to settle for a life or a job or a career that was never really our calling, and it doesn't impassion us. It doesn't make us feel alive. Most of us are losing the good for the average. Most of us are losing the good for complacency. Most of us are losing the good for security. Most of us are losing the good for the safe. The battle for most of us is not the battle between good and evil. It's not the battle between that which caused you to fall off the cliff. It's just the sin that so easily trips you up. It just slows you down. It keeps you from your highest intention. It keeps you from your biggest life. It keeps you from the great dreams and the great vision that God has birthed in your soul. And I wonder if you began 2025 asking yourself two really simple questions. What are the things I need to strip off my life that are slowing me down? And what is that sin that keeps me from living the life God created me to live most fully? And I know when we think of the word sin, it's usually a moral context of sin is something immoral or evil that we do. But in this context of this passage, what it actually is telling us is that a sin is anything that keeps us from running the race God has given us at the speed at which God created us to run. Anything that keeps you from God's intention in your life would be categorized in the space of a sin. It's the thing that keeps you from the best version of you. And then he says, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us, which I think is so exciting and so important. He says, let us run with endurance. And there are three things I want you to see here. One, it requires running. And running is never easy. Running is always hard. It requires you to run with endurance, which means it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Endurance, the race God has set before us. And so there's actually a race that God has set before you. There's a finish line that God has designed, that God has set for you to run toward. I would always joke with people. I said, look, I don't run. I mean, I was a sprinter. When I was in high school, I was a sprinter. I did not run long distance. Now I said, if you see me running down the street, call the police, someone's chasing me, because I just did not enjoy running long distances. But life is a marathon, and it is not a sprint. And sometimes life is a marathon that's also a triathlon that also has a series of sprints in the middle of that marathon. Because there are times you have to run at full speed and times you have to run a little slower and catch your breath, but you just have to keep moving forward. What's your image of heaven? It's funny because it seems like the classic image of heaven is that we get to sit on clouds and play harps or something, eat fruit and just sort of chill and enjoy life, which is really interesting because that's not how God designed faith in this life. In this life, he says, let us run. What makes us think eternity is going to be a place where we sit when earth is a place that we run? In fact, it seems to me that God always designs us with intention. Running on earth is just preparing you for running in eternity. Because God is not a God of complacency. He's not a God of safety. He's not a God of average and ordinary. He's always going to call us to run. And a part of what has to form in us is this endurance. And endurance is a reflection of character, not of talent. Talent doesn't teach you to endure. Character teaches you to endure. I was watching this conversation about Mike Tomlin when he was, he's still the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's been the coach of the Steelers since the beginning of time virtually, and for quite a long time. And he talks about how one of the things they look for, one of the attributes they look for in their athletes and their players is mental toughness. And he says that mental toughness is the same kind of talent as how far you can jump or how high you can jump or how fast you can run. That mental toughness is a measurable competency that makes individuals the greatest athletes in the world. And sometimes we don't really realize that there are things we have no control over. I have no control over how fast I was designed to run or how tall I was going to be or what my physical prowess would end up being like. And we oftentimes try to control the things that have limited capacity for expansion. But our mental toughness is completely in our control. I do not have control over how high I jump as much as I used to. And with every year and every month and every week and every day, my vertical leap gets shorter and shorter and shorter. Now, I can do some things to increase it a little bit, but I'm guessing it's going to go from 1 inch to 2 inches. And that's if I work really, really hard. But my mental toughness, it has unlimited capacity to grow. When I develop endurance, when I develop mental toughness, when I develop resilience, it means I can take on more. It means I can face greater challenges. It means I can rise up and be entrusted with bigger opportunities in life. I'm absolutely convinced that God is not looking for the most talented, but he's looking for those with the deepest character. Because when you have the capacity to face challenges, when you build endurance, you can take on the biggest tasks in the world. And then just realizing that this is the race that God has set before us, which I think is really important. Because I think sometimes we're running races that are not ours to run. Have you ever found yourself in a race for a job, in a race for promotion, in a race for a career, in a race for a girl, in a race for a guy, in a race for something, and you realize later you were not even supposed to be in that race? Is it possible that even when you've asked God, God, help me win this, that he didn't help you win it because it wasn't your race to begin with? It wasn't the one you're created to win. It's so important to take some time and ask yourself the question, am I running the race that God has set before me? Am I living the life I was created to live? Maybe the greatest tragedy was coming in first in the race you were not intended to run. And realizing that the race that has been waiting for you was designed for your victory. And then, of course, he gives us the example of Jesus. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. And even here, when he talks about Jesus, he's not actually trying to inspire us or deepen our faith about life after death. He's actually telling us, fix your eyes on Jesus, pay attention to how he lived his life. He's the one who initiates and perfects your faith. And look at how he lived his life for the joy that awaited him, enduring and suffering the cross, disregarding its shame and its pain and its suffering. And because of that, now he's seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. So Jesus ran the race he was called to run. And he finished that race. He endured and ran that race with full intention. And in the same way that Jesus finished that race and is being honored by his Father, he's telling us now we need to take on that example. He said, think of all the hostility he endured. And then you'll have context for the pain you're going through. So if you're ever at that place where you go, God, why are you letting this happen to me? You just need to step back and go, if he let it happen to Jesus, because that was the way for him to move through the race to the victor's platform, then why would God remove that suffering and that challenge and that difficulty from you or from me? He said, if you'll just look at Jesus and see how he lived his life, then you will not become weary and you will not give up. You're starting a new year. 2025 is waiting for you. This is the year that you could step in with so much intention, with courage, with hope, with faith. and align your life with the calling and purpose of God. And say, God, I want to run the race you've called me to live at the speed that you've created me to live it. Remove every weight that slows you down. Make the hard decisions and ask yourself, am I at the right place? Am I with the right people? Am I making the right choices in my life? What do I need to get rid of to move with God at the speed of God? What are the things I've allowed to entangle me, to hold me back? What's the sin that so easily trips me up time and time again? Let me step into the new version of me so that I can move with God in his path and allow the force of his momentum carry me forward. I am so excited about this year. I'm excited about this year for me. I'm excited about this year for you. I know there is more waiting for you in this year than you could ever ask or imagine. I know that if you'll trust Jesus and follow him with all your strength and with all of your heart and soul and mind, that you will experience life at a level you've never experienced before. You're made for this. God designed you for this. He didn't make you to sit on the couch and let time just slip by. He didn't make you to be average and ordinary. He did not make you to hide in safety and security. God designed you for the race. He designed you for the battle. He designed you for the struggle. And there's a massive crowd of witnesses cheering you on, saying, there is more in you than you know. You were built for this. You were born for this. You were made for this. Now it's time to run. You may be listening right now, and you know that your life is not what you were created to live. And maybe you've struggled to try to change the course of your life or the direction of your life, but nothing seems to work. And by the way, that's why Jesus came. Jesus did not come simply so that you would have confidence and hope after you die. Jesus came so that you could live this life fully, wide open, running at full speed, experiencing the fullness of life, being fully alive every day of your life. But it begins by entrusting your life to Jesus. You know, wherever you are right now, if you're sitting in your living room or in your bedroom or in your car or in the gym, that's a sacred space right now, because God is meeting you where you are right now. And what he's waiting for is for you to open up your life so that he can pour his life into you. And the way that journey begins is by coming to a place where you cross the line of faith and you trust Jesus with your life. You understand that it's God who can break the weight of sin in your life. It's God who, and God alone, that can bring forgiveness into your life. It's God who can give you the freedom you've longed for and the future that has been waiting for you. And if you're listening right now and you've never entrusted your life to Jesus, I want to invite you right now in this moment to make that choice, to pray a very simple prayer. Jesus, I give you my life. That simple sentence is the most powerful sentence that you will ever whisper if it comes from the depth of your soul. Jesus, I give you my life. That's what God is waiting for. That's what Jesus is waiting for you to give him your life so that he can give you his life. Right now, in this moment, just whisper this prayer. Jesus, I give you my life. And if this is your prayer, I just want to encourage you to reach out to us, to let us know that you've opened up your life to Jesus. But more than anything, tell someone. Let someone in your life know that you've made a decision to follow Jesus and to entrust him with your life, and that you're beginning 2025 as a journey of faith. You're beginning to run the race that God has created you to run. Now, you may be listening right now and you're ready to begin the new year, but you've already entrusted your life to Jesus. But you feel in your heart there's something you need to do. You feel compelled to act. And let me tell you, one of the beautiful things about our relationship with Jesus is that God actually gives us very concrete, tangible ways to express our faith. And what I've discovered in my own life is that when I choose to give, it is this recatalyzation of my commitment to Jesus. When I make a decision to tithe and to give generously, it is me from the core of my soul saying, Jesus, The commitment I made to you when I gave my life to you, that commitment is still active, alive at the center of my being. And so if you're listening right now and you're a follower of Jesus, I want to encourage you to give. I want to encourage you to begin 2025 as a year marked by generosity and maybe even sacrifice. And there are so many people around the world who join us at Mosaic, and they give of their hard-earned money so that everyone in the world can receive the message of Jesus freely. And so I just want to encourage you, if you consider Mosaic a part of your community, if what we've brought to the world has been a gift to you, go to mosaic.org/give and sign up right now for recurring giving, or give a one-time gift to begin 2025 with an act of generosity and sacrifice and faith. And I just want to thank you so much for joining us. Happy New Year. Let's take on 2025 and let's impact the world in an unexpected, extraordinary, and beautiful way. God bless.
You provide a path and a compass, a spirit to notice your presence when I need it the most. You provide the fuel to my fire, a burning desire to know you, to know